You have likely tried to root a cutting inside a glass of water at some point. You cut a branch, placed it in the water, and waited for the roots to appear. In the beginning, it seems like it's going to work. The branch remains green, the leaves stay firm, and you feel like you are on the right track. But as the days pass, nothing happens. The water begins to turn cloudy, the stem underneath darkens, and hope slowly fades away. When you least expect it, the cutting rots. The end of the branch becomes soft and brown. All that remains is a glass of wilted water and a sense of disappointment. Most people believe they simply have a heavy hand for plants, that rooting a cutting in water is a matter of luck, or that it only works with certain species. But the problem was never you. The problem is that you were missing a single piece of information that completely changes the outcome. There is something simple you can add to the water. Something that is probably already in your kitchen or your backyard right now. When you add this in the correct proportion, the cuttings react in a way that seems almost impossible. Roots appear in just a few days, white, firm, and healthy, where before there was only decay. Today, you are going to learn exactly what it is, why it works, and how to use it. Once you understand the reason behind this, you will never look at a cutting in water the same way again. Before showing you what to add, you need to understand what is happening inside that glass, because the answer lies in something no one has explained to you about how a plant creates roots. When you cut a branch from a plant, you create a wound. That cut is an emergency for the plant, which has lost its connection to the mother root. At that moment, the branch has two options. Either it manages to create its own roots fast enough, or it rots before it can succeed. It is a race against time. On one side, the plant is trying to form roots. On the other, bacteria are trying to decompose the submerged stem. Most of the time your cutting rotted, the bacteria won the race. It wasn't a lack of luck, it was a lack of speed in the rooting process. Everything we are going to do today serves a single objective: to accelerate the formation of roots so that the plant wins the race before it rots. To do this, you need to understand three things that happen inside the stem. The first is about hormones, the second is about oxygen, and the third is about bacteria. Let's start with hormones, because this is where the biggest secret lies. Every plant produces a natural substance called auxin. Auxin is the hormone responsible for signaling the plant to create roots. It concentrates at the tips of the branches and in growth regions. When you cut a branch, auxin begins to accumulate at the bottom of the cut. This is why roots grow from the base of the cutting, and not from the middle of the stem. However, there is a problem. In many plants, the amount of auxin that accumulates naturally is far too small. It is enough to start the process, but too slow to win the race against the bacteria. The cutting tries to create roots, but it rots before it can finish. This is exactly where what we add to the water comes in. There are natural ingredients that stimulate or complement the production of auxin in the cutting. When you provide this extra stimulus, the plant drastically accelerates root formation. What would normally take weeks begins to happen in just a few days. Now you need to understand the second factor that almost everyone ignores: oxygen. It might seem strange, but roots need oxygen to form and grow. Here is the mistake that almost everyone makes without realizing it. When you leave the cutting in stagnant water for many days, the oxygen in the water runs out. The water becomes stagnant, without circulation, and the forming roots suffocate. This is why many cuttings start to create a small root and then stop. The plant tried, but it lacked the oxygen to continue development. Stagnant water also favors the growth of the wrong kind of bacteria. Without oxygen, The very microorganisms that rot the stem proliferate. So, we already have two factors working against you in stagnant water: a lack of oxygen for the roots and an excess of decomposition bacteria. This brings us to the third factor that closes the cycle of the problem: the bacteria and fungi that live in the water and on the surface of the stem. Every branch has natural microorganisms on its surface. In clean, oxygenated water, they don't cause problems, but in stagnant, warm, and dirty water, they multiply uncontrollably and begin to attack the submerged stem before the roots can form. The darkening at the base of the cutting, which you have seen so many times, is exactly that. Bacterial decomposition advancing up the stem from the bottom. Now you understand the complete race. The plant needs auxin to create roots, oxygen to develop them, and protection against bacteria. When any of these three factors fail, the cutting rots, and in common stagnant water, usually all three fail at the same time. What we are going to do today resolves all three at once with simple, cheap ingredients that you likely already have at home. Let's start with the main ingredient, the one that stimulates the roots. Here you have several natural options, all of them efficient. The first and most powerful is willow water. The willow is a common tree, also known as the weeping willow, the one with the drooping branches. Willow naturally contains two extraordinary compounds: salicylic acid and indolabutyric acid, which is a natural form of rooting hormone. Indolabutyric acid is practically identical to the auxin that the plant produces. It is the same active ingredient used in store-bought rooting agents, only natural and free. Furthermore, the salicylic acid protects the cutting against fungi and bacteria. In other words, willow resolves two of the three problems at once. To make willow water, it is very simple. You cut some thin, new branches from the willow, the very green ones. Cut these branches into small pieces of about 2 to 3 cm. The smaller the piece, the more surface area is in contact and the more compounds are released. Place these pieces in a container and cover them with water. You can use room temperature water for a slower process or warm water to accelerate it. If you use room temperature water, let it rest for about 48 hours. If you use warm water, the time drops to about 24 hours. After this time, the water will have absorbed the willow compounds. It will have a slightly yellowish or brownish color. That is exactly what you want. You strain this water, and it is ready. Now you have a powerful natural rooting agent without having spent anything. But what if you don't have a willow near your house? Don't worry, because there are other equally accessible options. The second option is cinnamon powder. Common kitchen cinnamon has very strong antifungal properties. It doesn't provide the rooting hormone like willow does, but it protects the base of the cutting against fungi and bacteria, solving the decomposition problem. To use cinnamon, you can do it in two ways. The first is to sprinkle the base of the cut with cinnamon powder before placing it in the water. The second is to dissolve a pinch of cinnamon in the water itself. Cinnamon creates a protective barrier that prevents rotting while the roots are forming. The third natural option is honey. Pure honey has notable antibacterial and antifungal properties. Like cinnamon, honey does not provide rooting hormones, but it protects the cutting and creates a healthy environment for root development. To use honey, dissolve a teaspoon in a glass of warm water. Stir well until it is completely dissolved, and use this water to root the cutting. Important: use real, pure honey. Honey adulterated with sugar syrup does not have the same properties and can even hinder the process. The fourth option is lentil water, or water from other sprouted grains. When you germinate lentils, they release natural growth hormones. These hormones include auxins and other substances that stimulate rooting. The water where you germinated the lentils becomes rich in these compounds. To make it, leave a handful of lentils to soak until they begin to sprout. When that small white sprout appears, blend the lentils with water and strain it. This sprouted lentil water is a surprising root stimulant. It is one of the oldest secrets of natural plant propagation. Now that you know the options, let's put everything together into a complete method, because the ingredient alone is not enough. The way you use it is what guarantees the result. The method has 7 steps, and each one resolves a part of the problem. Follow all of them, and your success rate will change completely. The first step is choosing the right branch. Not every branch roots with the same ease, and this makes all the difference. Choose semi-new branches, neither too soft nor too woody. The ideal is a branch that is already firm, but still has flexibility when you bend it. Very new and soft branches rot easily. Very old and hard branches have difficulty emitting new roots. The ideal point is the middle ground, the branch that bends without breaking. This type of branch has the best combination of energy and rooting capacity. Choose a healthy branch, without spots, without signs of disease, and preferably a branch that has at least 3 or 4 nodes. The nodes are those little points on the stem where the leaves come out. It is exactly from these nodes that the roots will be born. So, the more submerged nodes, the better. The second step is the correct cut. The way you cut the branch directly influences the formation of roots. Always cut just below a node, at that point where the leaf connects to the stem. It is in this region that the highest amount of rooting hormone is concentrated. Make the cut diagonally, not straight. The diagonal cut increases the surface area and exposes more tissue to emit roots. Use a sharp knife or very clean pruning shears. A clean cut heals better. A crushed cut favors the entry of bacteria. If the knife is dirty, you are introducing microorganisms directly into the wound. Clean the blade with alcohol before cutting, especially if you have already used it on another plant. The third step is the removal of the bottom leaves. This step is simple but absolutely essential. Remove all the leaves from the bottom part of the branch. Any leaf that would be submerged in the water needs to be removed. Submerged leaves rot quickly, and when they rot, they contaminate the entire water and accelerate the decomposition of the cutting. Leave only 2 or 3 leaves at the top of the branch. Too many leaves cause the cutting to lose too much water before it has roots to replace it. If the leaves that remain are very large, cut them in half. This reduces water loss and helps the cutting survive until it creates roots. The fourth step is the treatment of the base. Now you apply the ingredient you chose to stimulate and protect. If you chose willow water, leave the base of the branch soaking in it for a few hours beforehand. This previous bath saturates the cutting with the rooting compounds. If you chose cinnamon, sprinkle the base of the cut with the powder. Tap it lightly to remove the excess and leave a thin layer adhered to the cut. If you chose honey, dip the tip of the branch in pure honey for a few seconds. A thin layer is enough to create antibacterial protection. This treatment of the base is what protects the cutting during the most critical days. The first few days are when decomposition most threatens success. The fifth step is the right water and the right container. Just as important as the ingredient is the quality of the water you use. Never use water with chlorine directly from the tap. Chlorine kills beneficial microorganisms and stresses the forming cutting. Let the tap water rest in an open container for 24 hours. This time allows the chlorine to evaporate naturally and the water to become safe. Or, if you prefer, use filtered water or rainwater. Rainwater is especially good because it is slightly acidic and rich in oxygen. Choose a glass container, preferably dark. Dark glass prevents light from entering the water, and light in the water favors algae. If you only have transparent glass, you can wrap the bottom part with paper. The important thing is to keep the forming roots in the dark, as would happen under the earth. The sixth step is oxygenation and the water change. This step resolves the oxygen problem we mentioned at the beginning. Change the water every 2 or 3 days without fail. Fresh water brings new oxygen and removes the bacteria that have begun to accumulate. Every time you change the water, lightly rinse the base of the cutting. This removes any slimy film that has begun to form on the stem. If you want to accelerate it even more, you can oxygenate the water manually. Before placing the cutting, stir the water vigorously or pour it from a height to incorporate air. Always keep only the bottom part of the branch submerged. The nodes need to be in the water, but the top leaves should never touch it. The seventh step is the correct light and temperature. The environment where you leave the cutting determines the speed of rooting. Place the cutting in a bright location, but without direct sun. Strong indirect light is ideal. Direct sun heats the water and cooks the forming roots. The ideal temperature is between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius. In lower temperatures, the process becomes slow. In very high temperatures, the cutting rots. If it is cold, place the cutting in the warmest spot in the house. Mild heat accelerates the plant's metabolism and root formation. Avoid moving the cutting around all the time. Plants respond better to stability. Choose a good spot and leave it there. Now you have a complete method in your hands, but there are some details that separate those who have success from those who still fail. The first detail is patience with the specific timing of each plant. Not every plant roots at the same speed, even with the perfect method. Plants like mint, basil, and ivy root very quickly, sometimes in a week. However, woodier plants, such as rose bushes and some trees, can take several weeks. Do not give up on a cutting just because it hasn't created roots in a week. As long as the stem is firm and green, there is still hope for rooting. The second detail is knowing how to recognize the signs of success. Before the roots appear, the plant gives clues that it is on the right track. The first sign is small bumps at the base of the stem. They are like small calluses or little balls, and it is from there that the roots will sprout. This tissue is called a callus, and it is the beginning of root formation. When you see the callus forming, you know that success is near. After the callus, the first white root tips emerge. They are delicate at the beginning, but they grow fast once the process kicks in. The third detail is knowing the right time to transplant to the soil. And here is where many people make a mistake, losing the cutting right at the end. Do not transplant as soon as the first tiny root appears. Wait until the cutting has several roots, each at least 3 to 5 cm long. Very short roots cannot yet sustain the plant in the soil. If you transplant too early, the cutting suffers a shock and can die. When the roots are firm and branched, then it is time to plant. And even so, make the transition with care so the plant can adapt. Here is a detail that almost no one knows about transplanting. Roots that grew in water are different from roots that grow in the soil. Water roots are more fragile and adapted to a liquid environment. When you throw the cutting directly into dry, hard soil, these roots suffer shock. Therefore, keep the soil very moist for the first few days after transplanting, almost waterlogged at the beginning, reducing the moisture gradually over 2 weeks. This gives the plant time to create new roots adapted to the soil. The gradual transition from water to soil is what ensures the cutting survives. Now, let's talk about which plants work best with this method, because understanding this will save you a lot of frustration. The champions of rooting in water are aromatic herbs: mint, basil, rosemary, sage, thyme, and oregano. All root with ease. Ornamental plants like ivy, pothos, peperomia, and spider plants are also excellent. These plants practically root themselves, and with the method, they become even faster. Many fruit plants and shrubs also respond well. Fig, blackberry, grape, and rose bushes root in water with the right stimulus. Some plants are more difficult and require more patience. Very woody plants and some trees may not root well just in water. For these more difficult plants, willow water makes an enormous difference. The natural hormone of the willow can stimulate roots where water alone would fail. Now, let me show you the most common mistakes that still cause cuttings to rot. Even following the method, these slips can compromise everything. The first error is leaving too many leaves on the cutting. The plant loses water through the leaves and cannot replace it without roots, so it wilts. The second error is not changing the water frequently. Water left stagnant for many days becomes a bacterial broth that rots the cutting. The third error is placing the cutting in direct sun. The sun heats the water, reduces oxygen, and cooks the forming roots. The fourth error is using water with chlorine directly from the tap. Chlorine stresses the cutting and kills the microorganisms that would help in the process. The fifth error is giving up too early. Many people throw the cutting away before giving the roots time to appear. The sixth error is submerging part of the leaves in the water. A submerged leaf rots and contaminates all the water in the container. The seventh error is transplanting with roots that are too short. The cutting cannot handle the shock and dies right at the finish line. By avoiding these 7 errors and following the method, your success rate will skyrocket. From cuttings that always rotted, you will move to having roots in the vast majority of attempts. Now think about what this truly represents. It is not just about rooting a cutting in special water. It is about you never needing to buy a plant that you already have at home again. Every plant you like can turn into 10, 20, as many as you want. It is about transforming a single mint plant into an entire garden bed. About multiplying that special rose bush and giving cuttings to those you love. It is about looking at a pruning and seeing not waste, but dozens of new plants. Every branch that would fall into the trash becomes a plant waiting to be born. The ancients knew this very well. Before garden stores existed, people multiplied their plants like this. They traded cuttings between neighbors and passed plants from generation to generation. That rose bush of your grandmother's might have come from a branch that someone rooted 50 years ago. When you learn to multiply your plants, you rescue this knowledge. You stop depending on the store and start producing life with your own hands. And that is why this simple method is so powerful. It is not about a water trick. It is about independence. Start today with just one cutting. Take a branch of a plant you like and test the complete method. You don't need a greenhouse. You don't need expensive equipment. You need a glass, chlorine-free water, one of the ingredients we showed, and a little patience. When that first white root appears, something will change in your head. You will realize that you have always had the power to multiply the life around you. And from there is no turning back. Every plant becomes a possibility. Every branch becomes a beginning. Nature charges nothing to multiply. She only needs you to understand how she works and walk alongside her. You have just learned exactly how to do that. If this guide has changed the way you look at the cuttings in your garden, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are unearthing the natural history and secrets that have been hidden for too long. Let's plant the future together. The next botanical treasure will be revealed very soon.